who I am. Well, if somebody would...
Hi, I'm T.A.R.A. Shannon, and welcome to T.A.R.A. Sessions. This series is all about decisions that we're making in our lives, kind of getting out of the conditioning that we have from when we're little, and then choosing what we're going to keep with us and what we're going to build on, and as we come to know ourselves as our true, authentic self, as we sort of expand or step into who we actually are. Sometimes when we're little, growing up, we have an idea of who we're supposed to be, and then we can grow into who we are and sharing that with the world. So my guest today is this beautiful young woman you see sitting here with me, who I've known for a really long time, more years than I care to admit. Because then you'll start doing the math.
It's all right. It works for me too.
It's true.
It's the same for me.
But you will forever be 8 years old in my head, which is when we met.
That happens. There's a few people in my life. It's the same thing.
Exactly.
So what? Like, are you 14 now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm 14. So this is Sam Timmins, who has joined me on the T.A.R.A. session couches today. I just thought she has such a beautiful story to share, and I've been very privileged to be alongside her as she's made a lot of these decisions in her life, coming into her own and growing into the young woman that she is today. And so she said she would come and talk about it, which I thought was pretty awesome. So welcome to the T.A.R.A. session.
Well, thanks for having me. I spend a lot of time here.
You do.
I'm lucky in that way, but there's always a new adventure.
That is.
We're always doing something.
So here's all the ways that we are connected so the audience knows. So I met Sam when she was about 8 years old. I was her first singing teacher. Did you do piano too?
I think you were my piano teacher first, before, yeah.
And then you started singing, and we did some singing together. And then you went on and got a much more accomplished teacher, which was great.
Which is not totally true, but I will say I didn't leave you for someone else.
No, it's true.
You were like, please move on.
Yes, you have outgrown me and my ability to teach you. So that was the beginning. So I was really young. I was probably like 20, 21 when I was doing that teaching, maybe 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if we do the math on our ages and stuff.
And the ages, yeah. And so it started like that. And then I ran a youth program, a music program, a youth ministry program at our church. And so Sam was part of that as well. And that turned into this youth production we did for about 12 years called T.A.R.A.
It was so fun.
It was so fun. The best memories ever. And so I got to know Sam more through that. And then 16 or 17, you started working at the companies?
When I was 16?
Yeah.
I was 16, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were talking age or year.
Yeah, no, the first, how old you were when you started. Mm-hmm. So Sam's worked for us in our group of companies like forever. So started just doing filing and basic stuff when you were in high school.
Basic filing. Yeah. At the time, we knew each other, but we didn't know each other that well. Like, we had had lessons and done that sort of thing. But at the time, my high school boyfriend at the time, his mom worked.
That's right.
His mom worked for you guys and was your main admin person. And she was like, I need some help in the summer. Yeah. You know, would you want to do some filing? And that's how it all started.
That's how it all started. And by all started, there's a lot that all started. So you went to school on and off and then worked in our group of companies up until last year.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but stopped filing and moved.
I've just been slugging away at that filing all these years.
And did everything from invoicing to receivables to eventually becoming the HR manager. Mm-hmm. You've got some training in that, but really you were just a right-hand person to me. And and now we work together every day.
Yes.
Doing what we both love, which is music. And Sam goes by Sam Stone as the incredibly talented artist that she is, and is finally doing music of her own, which I've been, I've been pretty annoying about it, actually, trying to push her to do that.
I'm sure we'll get into it.
We will get into that.
But it's been the best kind of annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're saying that. Some days I would be like, am I being too much?
Well, it's funny because in all those years in our traditional day-to-day 9-to-5 private sector job, we talked a lot about someday when we escape this.
Yes.
And it was always funny to me because that was your baby too.
It was.
And you were like, when we escape. And I'm like, it's not like we're working for somebody else.
No,
you know,
I had
you
to
were like,
myself.
when we get out of this situation, I'm like, when we leave your company.
Yes, exactly. Because I had always wanted to do a project like this, like the one that we're doing with Willow Sound. So yeah, we have so much to talk about, so much to get into.
Yeah.
So Sam is an artist signed to my label, Willow Sound Records, and she's also a staff member at Willow Sound and works with us to help develop and work with other talent through the syndicate. So we are very intertwined, and she also sings with me when my band plays, and yeah, so we know each other in lots of different capacities.
Yes.
And through so many different stages of our lives and things we've gone through.
Yeah.
And so you've witnessed me going through my deconstruction and sort of reevaluating and reconstructing my life in a way that was healthier and better for me. And when you watched me start to figure out that I matter and start making choices and healing from trauma and all that stuff. And I've been watching you do the same.
Yeah. Because I think I became a little envious of your journey, and I was like, that train looks hard. But it looks like there's a great destination at the end of it. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been thankful for the support. There's very few people in my life that have seen all sides. So some people know what I went through from a personal standpoint or family standpoint. Some people know what I went through, within the companies, but you are a rare person that has seen the whole 360 and all the different angles. So I'm really grateful for the support through that.
I've been happy to be there.
So I'm thrilled you said yes to this.
Yes.
Because now I get you in the hot seat. So we're talking all about, with this series, we're just talking about, the kind of conditioning that we were raised with. No judgment, no blame, no right or wrong. It's just in the recognition of the framework we grew up within, and how much, because what I'm noticing in my own journey is that I'm holding on to some pieces and I'm letting go of others.
Yes.
So tell me about your childhood and what it looked like. I mean, I know, but tell our viewers here.
Absolutely. So at the time, I believed, and I still do believe, I had a really nice, normal childhood. A very safe home, loving parents who are still together. My parents got together when they were 12 years old. Yeah, that's crazy. Which is just wild. But they also, by way of not saying anything, but just naturally that being the first love story I knew in my life. When I had my first relationship and boyfriend at 14, I was like, done, ready to go. Like, my parents have been together since 12, 14, I got this, That has not been how it's worked out. But even just going back to that alone, it's not like they ever said to me, you're not gonna date, see lots of people in your life, have different relationships. But just by way of viewing their relationship, I really at the time thought that's how it worked.
Yeah, that simple.
It was that simple, which most of us know that it's not.
And it is not.
For me, in my opinion, at this point in my life, with what I've experienced, they are 1 in a trillion.
Yeah.
And their relationship doesn't go without its challenges, I'm sure. So it's never just locked. But it's interesting to me when I look back to that was one of the first models of a relationship, and how you learn through modeling or just what you witness yourself without even necessarily having those conversations, and how subconsciously that sets in. Yeah. And you think that's how it is.
That's right.
So with my parents, it was a very positive situation, but the family structures that my parents came from were not as healthy from what I understand. I didn't witness it myself, but they both came from a bit of broken home situations, a lot of struggle. My mom came from a family with a lot of financial struggle, and my parents worked very hard to try to break the cycle, I think, for their kids. They were together since 12, but they didn't get married, I think, until 26 or 27. They didn't have me till 28. And they bought a house first, which again at that time was still a little bit controversial. But I loved how they weren't super traditional, and they never pushed traditional kind of roles or thinking on me in that way. But they worked very hard to make sure that if they were going to have kids, and I've had conversations with my parents about this since then, they weren't sure if they wanted kids. They weren't sure if they wanted to get married. They knew they wanted to be together. They bought a house first. That was their priority because that was not something they always had in their families necessarily. And then on top of that, for them, had said, if we decide to have children, then we'll focus in on marriage first. And so they ended up doing that. And they always said they wanted at least 2 kids. They didn't want an only child. So there's all these different pieces that they were...
the value of family was really...
mulling over.
Was set up for you.
Mm-hmm. And throughout my childhood, again, my family home was very stable, but in terms of my extended family, there wasn't always a lot of stability. My grandmother, my mother's mom, she would live with us for a bit, not live with us for a bit. I was very young at the time. I didn't really know what was going on. But as I became older, I realized, she was in and out of relationships and broken situations. She had a way of finding herself in relationships with abusive partners or partners who had substance abuse issues. And that's the environment my mom lived in and grew up in. And again, she was very adamant to not recreate that for us. So very lucky in that sense, in terms of I grew up witnessing a very loving relationship, not a relationship without its struggles or challenges. But of course, I'd see my parents argue, but to me at this point in my life, again, I think arguing is healthy. If there's no arguing, then there's probably something wrong. Yeah. Because arguing is just communication, and sometimes it's a little heated, but it's important to have. So in that way, in terms of relationships, I had a great model to look up to and look forward to. But then the financial piece of things, which I know we've talked about this before, my parents were never people who talked a lot about money. They did well for themselves. They worked really hard to provide my sister and I everything and anything we needed. In terms of activities, I was involved in everything I wanted to, in terms of singing lessons, music lessons, hockey, volleyball, varsity sports. And that was really important to them. But by way of that, because they had focused a lot of their finances into providing this wonderful life for my sister and I, they were pretty frugal about certain other things in their life. And I'm thankful now, obviously it was with the best of intentions. But it was not without its challenges, I think, in terms of money.
The messaging too about what security is.
Yes.
The feeling of security. So,
exactly.
And I have some of the same things in my life. We grew up with what I call, we always had a roof over our head and always food, but there was a general sense of it could go away at any minute. We're going to run out of food, or we're going to run out of money. So we were sort of on and off the social system throughout the years. And my dad always worked really, really hard. I'm the eldest of 6 kids, and my mom was the homemaker. And so it was not I hesitate when I always want to joke and say, Canadian poor, meaning I didn't realize it at the time.
Right.
I thought when people were dropping off bags of clothing for us, it was so exciting, and it was a bag of clothes, but I never had brand new clothes.
Right.
But I didn't know any different, right? So it was just, I thought it was like Christmas every time. And again, I'm the eldest of 6, so my younger siblings had a very different experience, right? Because my mom and dad were 19 when they had me, and they got pregnant with me in 20 or so when I was born.
Okay.
So, it's with a large family, you're having different experiences.
Absolutely.
So, but that feeling of, having not the sense of security as far as financials go. So I brought that in to my adult life as well.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm like your mom and dad. Getting a house was really important to me.
Yeah.
Because we moved every 2 or 3 years growing up. So having that place was a value for me, something I wanted, because I wanted my children to have that one place to go home to. But it's funny how those things drive us. You know, the messaging we get when we're young, and it's the reason I stayed in a situation, and it's the reason you stayed in because that was a big driver for you.
Exactly.
Security and responsibility.
Exactly, because when I was younger, you know, I never had a sense, I think contrary to you a little bit, I never had a sense of like any financial difficulty. Yeah. And in a way, like, there wasn't. Like, we had a stable home. I grew up in the same home. My parents are still in the same house. Like, I never went without. But as I got older and you become a teenager and you start wanting other things that aren't deemed necessary or required, and then you start having conversations about money and stuff, it's at that point I realized just like how tight it always was.
Right.
And it wasn't that we went without in that way. You know, they always worked really hard and made it work. But I started to realize the amount of like sacrifice my parents had made through the years, and the amount you start to learn the value of money and how much things actually cost and how much they like overextended themselves for the activities mostly. My parents weren't parents who, I still remember when I wanted a cell phone. I was 16.
Okay.
And I had just started driving, and I went to my dad and I said, I'd really like a cell phone, and these are all the reasons why. And it was about like safety and me driving, and what if I need to call, and this was when cell phones were first coming in, so it's not like all my friends had cell phones or anything like that. And I wasn't a big techie. It's not like I had, you know, PlayStations and Xboxes and all that stuff. And I remember going to him and like really preparing for this conversation of like, I really thought it was important for me to have a cell phone. And surprisingly, my dad at the end of the conversation was like, yeah, sure, you can have a cell phone. And I was shocked. Like, I was like, wow.
Because you thought he would see it as frivolous and unnecessary?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a catch. So he was like, of course you can have a cell phone. And I was like, oh, wow, this went so well. Yeah. Like, I really got my points across, and I didn't even have to fight him on it. And then he was like, yeah, you can, I'll drive you to the store as long as you have the money to buy it and pay for your monthly plan on your own. You can have a cell phone. And I remember being like, oh, there he is. Like, this makes more sense. But my parents, for me, looking back now as an adult, maybe in that moment I was a bit upset about it, but looking back, I really do value when, again, it came to extracurriculars, they would always make it work and cover those sorts of things. When it came to things outside of essentials, my parents were really good about instilling from a pretty young age like the value of money and like what you need versus what you maybe don't need but you want. So when it came to like school time, for example, they would always buy like the essentials of whatever I needed for school and clothing wise. When it came to things like cell phones at that time, which weren't a necessity at that time, and maybe some cool jacket that just looked cool but wasn't going to keep me warm, my parents were always like, if you want that, you have to save for it and get it yourself. And I was used to that from a very young age. I always had some sort of job from the time I was 12 or 13. I was already singing, gigging a little bit. I'd pick up filing jobs or catering jobs or whatever it was. And I learned to take care of myself independently from a very young age. And then again, looking back now, I think that bled in all of that subconsciously at the time. I wasn't really thinking about it and recognizing it. But I decided at some point at a very young age between what my parents were modeling, the standards they were setting for me in terms of financial conversations and budgets and what do you want versus what you need, and then seeing my grandmother in and out of these relationships with partners. And every time she left, she was in like a financial bind or would have to move in with us or would be really tight on money or have to sell her car or her guitar or whatever it was. And at some point I decided, like, as a young woman, I would never put myself in that boat.
Right.
And I think that's for me when it started in a way for me, like this path. I have a long journey still in like my healing and recovery, but when I look back, I think it's like very connected to that.
Yeah.
So I was a good student. I got good grades. I loved going to school.
What did you dream about being when you were little, when you dreamt about what your life was going to look like?
And it's funny because that's a common question that people talk about all the time. Whether you're in an interview situation, talking with a friend, on a date, whatever it is, like, what did you want to be when you grow up? Yeah. And I cannot really remember ever knowing, which is kind of sad. But so I don't know if I was just like of course there was things I talked about doing, or you see professions, oh, maybe that would be cool. But I always envy when somebody's like, I knew I wanted to be a teacher from day one, or I knew I wanted to be a singer and I'm willing to do anything, pack my bags, move to Nashville, live out of my car. I envy that like level of knowing, which for whatever reason, I've always been like very like transient in what I thought I want to do. I always had a lot of interests, played a lot of different sports, did a lot of different music. I didn't really know ever. And
if you have that that piece, I was just going to talk about, not knowing, but you always had the call or the pull to music. Music always called to you and pulled at you. But when you have that common sense, financial security cornerstone, it's really tough. Because those don't go together. There's nothing logical about following a music career, a music path.
Exactly. And I think that's, looking back, if I think the conditions were a bit different, it would have been, I want to be an artist, I want to be a songwriter, I want to be a musician. But I never had that thought because it was like there was a wall and a block put up there, and it was like, nope, not possible. It's like
you didn't grow up in a house of dreamers.
No,
it was a house of real life, hard knocks, nose to the grindstone, and you benefited from that in a beautiful way because you, like you said, you went without. You always had. You didn't go without anything ever. Yeah. But you, as an adult, are looking back on what the sacrifice was. So the message underneath it is work hard, nose to the grindstone, be responsible, earn your money, save your money, do the job you need to do to keep a roof over all of that stuff.
Exactly.
And I had a weird mix because I would say my dad is a dreamer. Like. I would,
and I know your dad too a little bit, and I can see that.
Like he was always like he would get an idea for a company and would start it. He was very creative. He had that dreamer side. So I did pick up a little bit of that, but I had the constant. I didn't have. Like mine was a constant state of anxiety around money. It was not the same as you're describing, which is just this: you make decisions in life and you work hard. I mean, I've always been a hard worker, and because I love to work, and I knew you had to work to get ahead, but I had a bit wider lane, I think, as far as the idea that you could choose these other things.
Right.
That came in my marriage.
Right.
The resistance to that came when I got married. So in my family of origin, I think there was a bit more room for dreaming, but not when I got into that marriage.
Yeah.
That was very different.
And then in a way, I think it's a different type of tough because it's like you had a taste of the dream and then it was like ripped away from you in a way where I don't feel like I never even allowed myself to dream, period. And I don't want to put the blame of that on my parents because it was never like they said, they were always supportive of music and stuff. I just decided myself at some point it was not an option.
It sounds like the relationship with money was also some of the messaging, and if I got this wrong, let me know, that if you chose to spend money on things that made you feel good or happy, it was irresponsible?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah. And my mom was never somebody who, like, she wasn't like a shopper or still isn't. Yeah. She's not someone who goes out and just like buys stuff ever. You know, you hear people joke about, or like people joke about their partners, like, oh, I can't leave them alone with my credit card, or, you know,
your mom at
or
all.
like, gotta, you know, go to work so that the wife can have what she wants. Like, it was never like that. You know, she was so, like, she would never ask for anything, you know, and she never complained about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think, like, I mean, I'm sure if maybe she was in a different financial situation, maybe she would be a shopaholic. But like those things weren't like important to her either. And even my parents never, like, they don't really buy each other like gifts, like what they would call like kind of frivolous or like lavish gifts.
Right.
They're always like very practical, whether it's like a birthday, an anniversary.
It's like a gazebo for the backyard.
Exactly.
Or something they could use
it's
together.
always like something they can use together, or like an appliance for the kitchen, or, you know, a trip that they go on together, like an experience together, which I love that. So yeah, I never saw like frivolousness.
No, everything was very practical.
Yes.
The way the money was spent was very practical. And ours, like I felt more like it was very practical, but it was also survival. Like there was this feeling in the house of it just, I don't even know how to describe it. And some of my siblings wouldn't even know what I was talking about. So just this idea is like, you know, when they would unload the groceries, my mother knew, like she'd be like, you can have one cookie. But she knew there were 6 of us, right?
Yeah.
So she just opened the floodgates. We would just be, the cookies would be gone. And she was trying to get them to last so we would have cookies for longer.
Yeah.
So I get it now, you know, but
For sure.
yeah. So, okay. So then with this foundation, then you started making choices in your life. So you graduate from high school and then you go into university, and talk about what was driving you to make these choices in your life down that path.
So I think that was a combination at that point of my parents. It was very important for them to have their children go to post-secondary or have a post-secondary education, because they didn't really have that opportunity themselves. My dad did trades and went to college for trades, which I think he was like the first person in his family to be educated beyond high school at that level. And it was just something that was really important to them, of course, out of love of, I didn't have this opportunity, I want my kids to have that opportunity. So they, of course, were always saving for that. And again, instilling for me what I think really taught me a lot about managing my own money from the start. Even university, my parents could have afforded to pay for it all, but it was always like, I'm going to pay half, you're going to pay half, which is when I started working at your group of companies to help pay for that. And you guys were great in terms of flex schedules and making that happen. But my parents' view was, if we just pay for it, you're not going to value it in the same way as if you have a stake in it.
Right.
You know, and I love that lesson and I appreciated that. So yeah, it was just, again, not a specific conversation. There was never a moment of like, do you want to go to post-secondary?
Right.
It just was always talked about, like, when you do. Same with teachers. I was a good student. So the conversation just was always, what are you going to take in university? It was never a conversation of, do you want to go? So again, I don't think I ever took the time to consciously decide, is that the path I wanted? It was just like, I found myself on this path, and you just kind of keep walking the path.
I know who I am.